morning, everybody. Wanted to spend some time this morning running through some new integrations with HP Agile Manager and PPM, as well as a review of the ALM integrations with PPM. I'll do all this, the demos in a new PPM 9.2 environment, so we'll get to see PPM 9.2. So from an agenda perspective, managing Agile projects using HP PPM and HP Agile Manager, managing the requirements and testing defects using HP PPM and HP ALM. And then we'll take a look at the centralized project and quality status visibility in HP PPM, where you can actually see the ALM scorecard for a given release in scope of a PPM project. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Quickly to introduce Results Positive, we're a North American consulting software solutions provider. We've been partners with HP, and we're exclusive strategic partners with HP since 2004. We've experienced 55% revenue year-over-year growth the last 3 years, and we've been the HP PPM Partner of the Year in 2010, 2011, and the Executive Scorecard PPM Partner of the Year in 2012. And really our goal as an organization is to strive for 100% customer satisfaction. We've worked with about 160 plus customers over the course of the last 8 years or 9 years, implementing PPM and ALM and several HP solutions. From a coverage perspective and what we do from a products and services perspective, focusing in the strategy, planning, and governance area, PPM and Executive Scorecard and Agile Manager, but also focusing on really 4 strategic initiatives this year from an HP perspective. Big data, which includes things like Executive Scorecard and BI, the application lifecycle management, where we get into ALM and quality testing, performance testing, the application portfolio management. On the BSM side, really focusing on BSM and transaction monitoring, and then in cloud operations, covering some of HP's offerings there as well. We also are a SaaS provider for HP PPM. We do provide physical and virtual hosting solutions for HP, as well as some additional reporting solutions as add-ons to PPM, leveraging business objects. So with the PPM, our Results Positive Resource Management Reporting Solution, this one is specifically a set of resource management portlets that we do. We also have, for some reason I'm having challenges here, we also have our BO Accelerated Reporting offering with 30-plus out-of-the-box reports. And then this is just a second view of looking at some of the sample reports around PMO metrics and cycle metrics. So this is kind of a view of looking at your proposal aging and the life cycle. And so these are a reporting package that we offer as well on top of PPM. So let's get into the content of the webinar, Managing Agile Projects in HP Agile Manager and HP PPM. So the real challenge here from a strategy and an execution level with Agile is, you want to allow development organizations to develop however they want to develop, whether it be waterfall, Agile, or some other methodology of development, but you still don't want to lose track of the big picture, aligning your goals with, your business objectives with the business, and ensuring that IT is actually delivering to those objectives. And that's fundamentally the problem with organizations that start to move to Agile development, as Agile development teams take over and develop solutions, and a lot of times you don't have a way to tie them back to what are the strategic objectives of the organization and the business to be able to deliver those business objectives from an IT perspective. And so that's where Agile project management comes into play. And HP's approach to this is really a comprehensive approach to manage multiple types of projects within an organization, whether they be traditional project management, Agile project management, or some other methodology. Using the combination of PPM and Agile Manager, with PPM you still drive business objectives and you go through proposals and you fund projects. And really when you get into the actual development, the build phase, is where it becomes more of an agile or traditional method that you make the decision on. But you still need to understand project costs and project health, and ultimately you do assign and are spending money with resources and budget allocations, and bringing that all together into a single picture is really the goal of this integration between PPM and Agile Manager. So the solution goal is to really manage separate Agile releases as part of an overall project or program in HP PPM. HP can be on-premise, it can be hosted elsewhere, and Agile Manager is a SaaS-only solution. So it doesn't matter where PPM is and where Agile Manager is, they can integrate together. So Agile Manager itself is a cloud-based offering, 100% available only in HP SaaS, a native cloud architecture with an instant-on service type approach, a very modern and clean UI. All the core functions of Agile are there: user stories, defects, task boards, plus a significant amount of out-of-the-box integrations with IDE solutions, push-button workspace provisioning, and the available synchronization with ALM and PPM. We'll cover the synchronization with PPM today during the webinar. Another piece of Agile Manager that we're not going to cover in this webinar, but I wanted you to make aware of it, is really focusing more on the build level. When you start to get into building an Agile project and the integration with the developer workspace, that's a separate webinar that we offer. So I know Kristen probably has one of those scheduled here in April or early May, and that's a way, if you're interested in looking at how ALM integrates with Agile Manager at that development build level, that's a full 1-hour webinar to go through all of that content. So the solution overview from an Agile Manager perspective and the integration is really talking about PPM, where you do your project planning, approvals, and status reporting, dropping into Agile Manager, where you do your release planning, your sprint planning, your sprint execution, your visibility and insight, and then pushing that visibility and insight of what's happening within your Agile project back up to PPM. And so this whole phase of doing all of the release planning and the sprint planning and the sprint execution is done within the Agile Manager. And then when you get back to PPM, it just reports the status and visibility of those Agile releases back into PPM, and you'll see that in the demo. This is kind of another view of the solution, details perspective, really kind of breaking it down by major function, where you have the business doing all of the things they always do in PPM, objectives and priorities, their financial management, high-level dashboards and reporting and status, portfolio management. They're doing proposals, projects, and maintaining those investments, demand, time, resource, and program. And the Dev and QA group is actually doing iterative development and execution of the projects that come out of PPM. And so from a solution detail perspective, we really have the demand coming into the Agile Manager from PPM. Then you build epics, themes, and user stories as you go through requirements. And when you get into development, you assign tasks, execute, and update the backlog. And ultimately, you report in Agile Manager to a burn down, a healthy sprint, resource usage, and then you send the progress and resource usage of that back to PPM. The first version of this integration really just does the progress of the sprint status or the release status back to PPM, and you'll see that in the demo. But I think longer term, this is the vision of what the whole cycle would look like, where we're talking about resources and resource usage and demand coming in. And so I'll show you as we go through the demo how the integration works today. So really kind of the use case is Kathy's a project manager, a fast-paced company, multiple projects, and most of them are agile. She cares about project scope, schedule, and cost, as well as project quality. She doesn't care how development works, either waterfall or agile, but she does need to know the real-time project quality in case there's a problem she needs solved. And so as you start to go through the project initiation approval in PPM, this is all of the standard proposal process that would be the front end of a project, really regardless of whether it's going to be executed as an agile or a waterfall project. She fills in the necessary information to trigger the approval process, and then ultimately you get a project that's approved and funded, and Kathy will start managing that project and monitoring real-time agile status project quality for the Agile Manager release. And so these are some screenshots I took, but I'll show you the live demo of that. So at this point, I'm going to jump into the live demo and just quickly show you how this works. So I'm actually signed into HP's Agile Manager. So once again, this is a fully hosted solution on HP SaaS. You can see that I'm currently looking at release 2 of my Agile project, and I'm in sprint 3. There are multiple sprints in my project, and I'm actually looking at the blue team, the Agile development team. And you can see all of the associated charts you can get from Agile Manager. They're specific to the development. But what I really want to focus on is how it integrates with PPM. So if I go into the release backlog, into release management, I'm now looking at release 2. And if I specifically choose to filter this for, sprint 2, I just want to see all of the user stories that are in release 2, sprint 2 within that backlog. And so you can see all of these user stories are done. Let me go ahead and take a look at sprint 3 as well. Sprint 3 is the sprint that's currently in progress, so I'm going to focus on that one. So these are a set of user stories that are defined within the 3rd sprint of this particular release for this particular team, and you can see their status here, who they're assigned to, and you can actually drill in to the details of this particular one. And so this user story is, once at my shopping cart, I'd like the option to check out or to continue to shop, and it has a particular task. Actually, the related tasks for that, add buttons for checkout, continue to shop. That task is 13 hours in total, 11 hours invested, 2 hours remaining. So that's really what it looks like at the detailed level within Agile Manager. So you've got the user story and then an associated task. You also see acceptance tests here. You can see that these acceptance tests actually integrate with ALM. And so that's, like I said, a separate webinar, but the detailed integration between ALM and Agile Manager as well. So now if I jump into PPM, I'm looking at the Mercury Tours application. I actually set up a dashboard that was an iterative development status, and you can see just based on this dashboard that we're currently in sprint 2 and 3 of that release 2 of this application, and here are those associated user stories. But I want to actually jump in to this Mercury Tours application and show you where the integration points are. So the first thing you'll notice when you jump into the project summary now is the Agile Project Timeline tab that's been added. And so this is really the focus of the integration in this first release, is where you can see that we have a release 1 and a release 2 and what their start and end dates were, and then the progress of each of these releases. And what you can do in real time is actually view the details. And so we're currently in release 2 from March 25th to April 19th. It's 67% complete, and you can actually view the burn down details of that release right in Agile that's coming from Agile Manager right on the PPM overview page. And so you can see how we're doing against that. So we have the sprint burn down chart where we see the remaining effort, as well as the the release burn up, where we see the story points and the story points that are done as we burn up through this execution. So we're about 2/3 of the way done. Looks like we're a little bit behind on story points. But that's the visualization of the integration between PPM and Agile Manager for the first release. And that's really executed by associating an Agile project, and I'll open the work plan and show you the association. So within the Agile project, you actually, on a given task, you associate the release within Agile Manager to the PPM project, and that's all done actually right here. So this, when you initially set it up, and you can actually remove this if you wanted to, but when you actually set it up, you tell it which Agile project you're going to or which release you want to tie to a task within the work plan of PPM. And then ultimately what it does is, let me go back to this project. Ultimately what it does is then starts to bring over all of the associated user stories. So it synchronizes these user stories within Agile Manager and PPM under the release and the sprint. And so that's where it gets the visibility. So this, once on my shopping cart, I'd like the option to check out or continue to shop, is the same user story that we were reviewing over here within Agile Manager. And you can see 11 hours invested, 2 remaining. So the 13 hours is what is showing here as the scheduled effort within PPM. So that's a quick overview of the Agile Manager and PPM integration. So giving the overall visibility of the Agile releases within the scope of the PPM project. So now I'm going to move into tracking requirements and defect management using PPM and ALM. So this is an integration that's been around for a very long time between HP and PPM and ALM, but there have been several enhancements of the integration in PPM 9.2 with both the usability and configuration and setup of the integration. So I'll go through these in detail, but fundamentally, manage and define requirements within ALM is one of the core capabilities of ALM. But a lot of organizations leverage PPM to drive that demand funnel of bringing demand into the organization, and whether it's a proposal or an enhancement or a break-fix request, those types of demands all funnel in a lot of organizations through HP PPM. And the real reason for that is the same strategic resources that are working on your strategic projects also are the ones who potentially do problem resolution and break-fix and enhancement work. And so having the visibility of that demand within PPM allows you to assign and associate those resources to that work. But as you do that work, for instance, an enhancement request, one of the key things you want to do is to be able to pass that requirement of a new enhancement request coming to ALM so that ALM can fundamentally build out the requirements, build out the test cases, and when the development of that enhancement is completed, then you're able to do and perform the testing within that. And so that's really the goal of this requirements integration between PPM and ALM is at the right point in your process from an enhancement or a break-fix perspective, let ALM and the quality team know that there's an enhancement or a fix coming that they need to be prepared to test. And so there's also a defect capability integration between the two, and I'll show that as well. But fundamentally, I guess getting the requirement into ALM so you can, test the associated requirement as it comes through and build out the test cases and manage the defect is the goal of the integration. So really managing project requirements and defects. You're doing all of your project execution in PPM, requirements and defect and testing within ALM. and the ability to pass the information between the two solutions. So I'll quickly jump in and do the demo of that solution as well. I'm going to start here within the scope of PPM, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail here because this is has a lot of new capabilities within the integration that I want to show. So I'm actually going to start by looking at how the integrations are configured. And you'll see that under the Manage Application tab within PPM, you actually have several integrations here that are built out, and it's by request type. So I have an integration, ALM Defect template with Quality Center integration out of the box. I have an ALM request for change, and then I actually have another specific request type that are integrated, and these are integrated by the specific requirement type, so the defect or requirement that's integrated between the two. And so let's start with the defect. When you look at the defect integration with ALM, it's fundamentally just requiring you to say, what is the ALM server? How do I get there, and how do I authenticate? And then which domain and which project do I want to connect to ALM with? And then what's the entity type? And in this case, it's a defect. And then you have some integration options. So you can say, you know, if I create it in PPM, a defect, it creates it in ALM. If I create it in ALM, it creates it in PPM. Or if I create it in either, it replicates it into both systems. And so I have my configuration set up where it actually, if I create it in PPM, it'll go to ALM. If I create it in ALM, it will create a copy of that in PPM. And then the next step in this integration is really to map the specific columns between ALM and PPM. And so this is all UI-based mapping of the capabilities where the detected on date in ALM maps to the creation date in PPM, the summary or name maps to the description, severity, disparity, and there's actually the capability within here to map if you have different values. For instance, this isn't a good example because they're all the same, but low, medium, high, very high, urgent, you can map those if there are differing values within the integration. And all that's configured within the scope of the PPM UI. The other thing I'll mention here is that the control decides who wins if the field is fundamentally updated and who owns the field if you have synchronous updates. So PPM controlled, QCALM, or it can be bidirectionally passed between the two. And that's fundamentally all it takes to set up the integration. You can also configure it to send email notifications when an error occurs within the integration, etc. So I'll also show you one other thing within the integration before we see it work. There's actually very good logging capabilities now to see when the integration is failing and what's happening. And you can see even some things I was doing this morning where a PPM request has been updated. So this request 34059 has been updated by the integration and it's tied to Defect 94 and ALM. And so that's the details of the logging. So this is there's a lot of new capabilities in logging and configuring these integrations that came with PPM 9.2. So I'm going to show an example here of creating a defect within PPM, and I'll just very quickly create it. So I'll just say this is a new defect, I don't know, for the financial summary report. And I'm just going to go ahead and submit that. One of the new capabilities within PPM 9.2 is when you submit this, it actually gives you a very good capability to find your required fields and actually highlights them. Severity is actually a required field within the integration. And there's another required field that's not mapped in PPM, and it's this developer comments as a user field in ALM. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that out and submit this request. And when I submit this request, this immediately is going to integrate with it into ALM. And so now if I come down here and look at the defect information, all of this is filled in, the Quality Center instance and domain. And you can see now that I have a defect number 95 that's been created in ALM. So let's go now to ALM and go ahead and just refresh my defects here. And you can now see defect number 95 here. And if we open it up, we can see the new defect that was created. It's actually tied to that request ID within PPM. You can see that I don't have all the required fields ultimately filled out, and that's because our ALM instance is being used by lots of people for demos, and these are new fields that are required that weren't required before. But the integration, this new defect for the financial summary report, is now tied between the two systems. And if you update fields that are mapped within ALM, they'll be sent to PPM and vice versa. So that's the defect side of it. The next integration I'm going to cover is the requirements integration. And I'm going to go ahead and create a request for change within PPM. I want to make sure I do the right one here. I believe it's this one, the ALM request for change. And this RFC summary, so this would be an example of creating a request for change or an enhancement within the scope of PPM. So if we say just new enhancement request, and once again I'm going to use this new capability because it allows me to easily see what I need to fill in within the scope of the PPM request. I'm going to go ahead and submit that. Missed one here. So once that request is submitted within PPM, I'm going to show you the workflow here, and I'm going to run through the actual workflow process, and it's quite extensive in this out-of-the-box change request. And so I'm going to run through this and show you how it works. This is a fairly extensive one, but ultimately we'll go through and filter this enhancement request. We'll allocate the priority, and then we'll authorize and schedule a change within the solution. And then if it's an application change, this is actually where the integration with ALM works. And so when you decide that it's an application change, it's actually going to go in and create the requirement within ALM. And this parallel process is really what you're trying to leverage, where you know an application change is coming, your design's complete. At that point, you really want to send it to Quality Center to start, or ALM, to start planning the testing of it while the development's going on, so that you can do this work in parallel. And when the development's done, the goal is that the testing is ready to go, and you get quicker time to market as you come out of that process. And so, as I said, this is a big workflow. It's going to take me a couple of minutes to get through the steps that I need to go through, but I want to actually show you the integration working. So we've created this new enhancement request. I'm just going to go ahead and accept that. I'm missing a value for category, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that RFC. I'm going to say that this is a non-immediate, meaning that this is going to go through a standard change process as opposed to an emergency change process. So it's a non-immediate change. And then we do a resource assessment, complete that. This has the ability to select CIs from the UCMDB. I'm not going to walk through that in detail, but I'm going to just continue through and say I did that. You do an impact assessment. That's been completed on the request for change. We review the impact analysis. That's been completed. And then it goes to a CAV approval. That's approved. And then we're at a point where we can authorize and schedule the change, so we can authorize that. Who authorized it? I'll just say the admin user did today, which is the 11th. And is this an application change? We want to say yes, so we can send that requirement to ALM. Now we've come in, we've completed the design of the change. And at this point, it asks what our quality process mode is. We're integrated with ALM, so I want to say it's Quality Center. And when I say quality process entry approved, this is when it actually goes and does the integration and creates the requirement in ALM. And so now we can see the Quality Center requirements is sitting at requirement setup completed. I will show you that within this request now, we actually have a Quality Center requirement number, and once again, it's integrated to that ALM instance that we were looking at. So we'll quickly go over and look at ALM 11.5. We'll go into requirements module. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. And now we'll see we have this new enhancement request that came over. You'll notice that part of the integration setup is to tell it which requirements folder you put it in. That's new capabilities as well. So I put it in a PPM backlog folder. And this is the integrated requirement that's come over from PPM. Now, similarly to the defect integration, as you update map fields within ALM, it's going to go back and synchronize those updates into PPM depending on how you have the mapping set up between the two. So that's fundamentally the requirements, and at this point you would take that requirement, you would assign it within a particular release within ALM, and then ultimately start building out the test cases so that when the actual enhancement is completed, you're ready with test cases to move forward and test that enhancement request. So that's tracking requirements and defects through Quality Center, ALM, and PPM integration. And then finally, I'm just going to quickly show a third integration between PPM and ALM. And this really enables project managers to have that comprehensive quality view within PPM of what's going on within the ALM project or release. And that's really focusing on this release ALM scorecard that you can embed within the PPM project overview page. And so it's really linking a PPM project to a release within ALM to be able to see the scorecard from ALM. And so I'll go ahead and jump back out here to PPM once again. I'm just going to go to my home screen. I actually created a link just to quickly get to it. So this project, APO pilot, what I actually did on this project is integrated it with a release within ALM. And when you do that, what you end up with is the ability to see the actual scorecard within ALM directly within the PPM solution. So you can see, and these projects don't tie together. I don't have data that ties both of them together, but this is a project quality scorecard from a scorecard release 10.5 within ALM. and you can see all of the associated milestones within the ALM release and what's happened with each of the requirements as far as the number of tests authored, the percentage of tests automated and covered, etc. So this scorecard gives that visibility of what's happening within the testing of those releases within ALM.